So it's well done for turning out tonight, because really this talk is the practical side of what it is that we've been talking about the last time I was here in England. Now I think a few of you were at those talks. Yeah. Who wasn't at the first series? Naomi, you were at the last one.
No, I've been to 3. Have you had 3 or 4 altogether? 3. I've been to 2 then.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and this lady hasn't been to any. Okay, the main thrust or the main emphasis of these talks really is something I call spiritual incarnation. The idea, particularly in the West and actually also in the East, is that as fast as we can get out here, the better. In other words, that really we want to be away from the physical plane up towards the spiritual dimensions, heading towards home as quickly and as rapidly as we possibly can. Now the idea and the focus really about what I'm teaching here is the complete antithesis of that. It's the total opposite of that, which is basically say, no, the point is we were already there and we came here for some reason, for some purpose, because here we are, we're in physical incarnation. And the reason and the purpose behind this is to incarnate aspects of our higher consciousness. Now you won't do it all in one lifetime, but over the course of perhaps hundreds of lifetimes we will be eventually fully incarnate here in physicality. And what I mean by that is all our potentialities and all our resources will be here with us on earth. And we do that one little chip at a time, one day at a time, one step at a time you might say, every single day of our life, whether we like that or not. Now, for those that don't know me, I really have lived both sides of the equation in terms of spiritual practice. I started out when I was 18 as a monk, and I lived in India for about 8 years, on and off. I had to keep coming backwards and forwards to England, rather inconsiderately, because of the visa regulations and the visa controls that were in place at the time, and still are, actually. So I spent a life really in the Eastern tradition and the Eastern thought, and really a lot of what I'm teaching here is rooted in that. And the Eastern tradition, in my mind, represents the summum bonum, you might say, the pinnacle or the cream of esoteric understanding. The reason why this is, I believe, is because the tradition, the spiritual tradition, is rooted a long, long, long way back. So you could say really this is ancient wisdom, or this is ancient knowledge. And it's been hidden really in the Indian scriptures, which are known as the Vedas. Yeah, come in.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. Nice to see you.
Hi.
You'll have to grab a chair from upstairs
Okay.
and bring it down. Yeah, or from outside if there's a spare one there.
All right.
So the ancient scriptures in India called the Vedas. Who hasn't heard of Vedas? So everyone's heard of the Vedas. Vedas literally means knowledge. Yeah, well done. Perhaps you could shuffle forward, Adrian.
If I go back.
Or go back, yeah. How are you doing?
Good, thank
Yeah?
you. Yeah.
Actually, just sit by the door. I don't think there's anybody else coming. So.
Okay.
Give it a good shove. Yeah, great. So the Vedas in themselves are supposedly timeless. If you read the description in the Vedas, it describes that this was really originally an oral tradition that went back tens of thousands of years, even before it was codified and written down about 5,000 years ago. So the current version that we have now, which is about 5,000 years old, is the brand new, up-to-date version. That is the 5,000-year-old written version. Before that, people had perfect memory, and they didn't have to have anything written down. So the teacher could instruct the disciple in a matter or an instruction, and the disciple would remember this in its entirety for the rest of his life. And people can still do this in India. It's called smrutidhara in Sanskrit. It means you can hear something once and remember it. And there are many Brahmins or priests in the south of India that still actually can do this. And they do these incredibly long, what's called yogyas, or sacrifices where they chant a lot of hymns and a lot of prayers for hour after hour after hour, and not one syllable is missed. It's incredible. They have this power of their mind through yogic practice. So I was very much working in that way, in a way, when I was working in the temple, but unfortunately I had this upbringing in the West up until about 18 that had completely corrupted me. So really I was looking there to purify and to cleanse and to enlighten and to get out of where I was here on planet Earth, because I saw this was really a place of suffering. It was a place of pain. That was my perception of it at that time. What I came to realise after some time in the ashram, probably about 6 years or so, is that I wasn't feeling very fulfilled. And I'd missed out something. And I couldn't define what it was that was missing. And I realised, actually, many, many years after I'd left the temple, what that was. And basically, it was the feminine. It was the feminine. We were celibate monks, and we were basically learning, and we were basically studying, and we were basically applying the mental aspect, consciousness, in terms of trying to reach enlightenment. But we completely, in that process, negated the feminine. In fact, we considered this a place really that we should not go. We should never enter into that, because we could get caught up in that, and we may spend a long time, maybe lifetimes, trying to extract ourselves. In Sanskrit, this is called the world of Maya. Who's heard of Maya? Yeah. It's the illusory realm, or the illusory reality. Basically, it's all of this, the created universe. So the idea was to remain cloistered, to remain separate from this feminine principle. And even in terms of our own vows, where we were celibate. And we would never mix, and we would never engage in conversation or anything at all, unless it was absolutely necessary. So we lived this completely segregated, celibate existence. And it nearly killed me. I mean, after 8 years of this, I think I came out a real, what I would call, crispy critter. You know, I was really looking for some nourishment and something to really, as it were, whet my appetite a little bit, because I was really quite drained and quite depleted. And I wasn't feeling at all enlightened. So where really I'm going with this is to where I start with today's talk. Because for those that have come to the previous 3 talks...
So you needed Shakti?
Huh?
You needed Shakti?
Shakti, yes. Yes, we had the Purusha component, but without the Shakti. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Purusha basically means enjoyer. Shakti means energy. So Purusha enjoys the energy. That's considered to be what's called Leela in India, where God or spiritual beings enjoy the Shakti. Whereas when we're here in the physical universe, the Shakti appears to us as Maya. It appears to us as illusion, and not so pleasant and enjoyable. So we're very much caught up in the throes of what they call in the scriptures karma, at this level of existence. That's not Leela, which is pastime, which is a transcendental activity. Our activities are karmic, mostly, for the most part. So anyway, it brings me to this point where we're going to start really with this, and I'm sure we're all familiar with this from the last 2 or 3 talks. Yeah. This is the idea that there is a masculine and a feminine aspect to consciousness. Now what I'm going to do here is do a complete fast recap of basically 6 hours of the previous 3 talks, for those that haven't been to any of those. So I'm going to move through that very, very quickly, and then move on to describing really what it is that we're going to be looking at today. So the principle here that we're going to be looking at here really is starting with the principle of oneness. Actually, our friend John here has just been to the, is it Oneness Academy?
Oneness University.
Oneness University, yeah, in India. So this theme of oneness is pervasive throughout the Eastern cultures, and actually is becoming more and more so here in the West. In Sanskrit they call this Advaita, and I'm sure we've all heard of this. It means not dual or dualistic, but one. And then there is the Vaita school, which is basically the opposite of that, which is a dualistic school. Now my training and my understanding from the scriptures going back to when I was 18, one of the first principles that we were taught was Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva, which means that we are by nature in our spiritual essence simultaneously one with and different from God. So one branch of Indian teaching will say that we're the same as God and we merge with God, like a drop would merge with the ocean. And another branch which say that actually we're eternally separate. There's always the drop and there's always the ocean, a bit like Christianity or a lot of the modern religions. Yeah? But in the way that we were learned, Achinta Bheda Bheda Tattva basically says that actually both are simultaneously true. We are forever eternally an individual, and yet we are one with the divine. That's why it's inconceivable, because we can't conceive of that. Therefore, Achintya, inconceivable. The analogy here, or the metaphor here, really is of the ocean merging into the drop. If you see the way that plays out. Yeah? So if we start with Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva, we will see that actually we are always distinct, but always one with the Supreme. And yet God wanted to know himself, and he separated from himself in order that he could get a vantage point. Understand? He couldn't know himself as he was because he was everything. He had to be separate from himself in order to look back and see himself. And this was the first thing that happened. This separation into what we call masculine consciousness and feminine energy matter, or Shakti. And these two, in the modern, I believe, New Age vernacular, would describe what we call the twin flames. Who's heard of this term? Everybody? Yeah. So these twin flames really are exactly the same, but completely diametrically opposite. And they go on two separate journeys of evolution, you could say. There's actually two halves of us going in two different directions. But ultimately, after many, many, many millions of years and evolution through the various kingdoms of life, mineral, vegetable, animal, we arrive at the human kingdom. And these two aspects of our consciousness come together. This is where they meet, in this physical human vessel. And this is where we all are now. We're human beings. And this is the potential for a human to really aspire for that which is more noble and that which is higher within us. And it can only be done through the fusion of masculine consciousness and the female principle of Shakti, or energy. Feminine consciousness or energy always wants to rise. Masculine consciousness always wants to fall. And they are attracted to each other like a lover and a beloved. Yeah? In the Indian scriptures they have Shiva Shakti, they have Radha Krishna, Lakshmi Narayan. Yeah, I'm sure we've heard of some of these things. And really what they're saying there, that this is really the pinnacle of human consciousness. And these archetypes, if you want to look at them in that way, actually mirror really what it is that we are all inside of us. We are inside of us the archetypes of Radha and Krishna, Shiva and Shakti, Lakshmi and Narayan. We are all of that. And the stories and the descriptions that are given in the Vedas are really to inspire and to cultivate this mood, or this ras, or this energy of devotion. What they call bhakti in Sanskrit. Who's heard of bhakti? Yeah, who hasn't? Yeah, bhakti. It means devotion or devotional love. And they see this as being the ultimate principle in life. Bhakti, loving devotion. Yeah? So, where does that leave us in this day and age? Where does that leave us right here at the beginning of the 21st century? Well, as we've discovered, it leaves us in a pretty neurotic state from where we were from ancient times, going back about 5,000 years. Because at this time, where we are now, we have become very heavily scarred. We have become very heavily imprinted. In Sanskrit, this is called samskaras. And samskaras really literally mean scarification or imprints of our astral body. Now, we've covered this in detail on the previous talks. Now, I know there's one or two people here that haven't been to those talks, but I'm not going to go into talking about samskaras here because we've talked a lot about that, and I'm sure everybody here knows about that. But needless to say, how that feels is like we are all veiled. We are all separate. We are all cut off from our spiritual connection, or at least it feels that way most of the time. Would anybody disagree with that? No? Yeah. The reason why it feels like that is because we have a core veil that separates us and gives us this sense of false identity, false ego, false self. In fact, it is the false ego, the false identity, the false self that is the veil. And this is made up of the bricks. Each one is a samskara. Each brick in our egoic consciousness is a samskara. It's a little wound, a little hurt, it's a memory, it's a trauma, it's a pain, somewhere lodged inside of us from our past. And all of those samskaras accumulate within the field of our astral consciousness, and they give us really what you could call our emotional life. Emotional life. And this is completely distinct from our feeling consciousness. Our feelings are attuned to source, emotions are from samskaras, and they are very different. They pull us in totally diametrically opposite directions. Yeah? Samskaras, for the most part, are quiet, they're inactive, and they just give us this feeling of separation and aloneness, abandonment. They give us this feeling of being cut off. But a samskara from time to time can be triggered and activated by stimulation from our environment, either the environment itself or other people in the environment, which will trigger or operate a samskara within us. This will open, and this will then bring the memory, the trauma, the hurt, the pain into our waking consciousness. It will be active for some time, and will be like angry, enraged, frustrated, whatever it might be, and then that samskara, as it were, is fed, it's nourished through that, and then it closes, a bit like a clam. But it still remains within our field of consciousness, forming a brick within the core veil. So this is where we are now, and it has been described that we're in such a samskared state of consciousness at this time that we live, really, you might say, in an ocean of samskars, individually and collectively. And trying to clean our samskars is a little bit like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. An impossible task for any individual human being. And I think from times I actually do feel like that's what I'm trying to do. And it's incredible, because there are moments and there are times I just feel like, is this ever gonna end? Has anybody here not felt that? Yeah. When do I get to the end of this? You know, it's like, no matter how much I do or how far I go with this, there always seems to be more. And not just more, but it seems to get heavier and heavier as I go deeper and deeper. You know, so far from being rewarded for my diligent work and efforts, it feels like I'm actually being punished at times. Well, it used to. I mean, not now, it doesn't so much, I have to say, thankfully, but it used to feel like that. Until I came to understand the real nature of reality. Now, within us, our samskars, this core veil, operates upon our physical body through a gateway. And it's this gateway which is the key to understanding what are effective practices in one's life. Those practices which don't work, those practices which do work, all operate on this one fundamental principle. And anything that we do or practice in the context of spiritual meditation, any kind of yoga or processes, be they New Age or Chinese or Indian or otherwise, can only be effective to the extent that they operate on this fundamental principle. Only. There's one principle that is at the key, this gateway as I describe it, that unlocks enlightenment for us, is resident within every human being. Every single human being. So it's got absolutely nothing to do with skin colour, culture, or religious upbringing, or any other denomination we may give our physical bodies. Because we all have this in common. And it's the central nervous system. We all have one. Central nervous system. Yeah, you understand? Mm-hmm. This is distinct and separate from our peripheral nervous system. We have a central nervous system. Now, it brings us to this two brains illustration here. Where most of us are in the Western world, and I'm sure you're familiar, and I get this with clients most of the time, is that we tend to be erring towards what in neurology they would call the left brain. The left side of our central nervous system, that's here. So this is the part of us that is responsible for thinking. It's rationale, it's logic, sequences of thoughts and ideas. This is our left brain, what we would call the masculine consciousness. Yeah? This part of us, if it becomes dominant, which it has predominantly become dominant here in the Western culture, and it's out of hand, it actually defers, or it hands its operational control over to something called the reptilian brain, or the R complex. So if you are an intellectual, clever, very, very logical, rational sort of person, and that's taken to the extreme, you will operate off in your life from the reptilian brain, basically. Not a great place to be. The reptilian brain is concerned only with survival. This is where most of us are, and this is where most of our society is, here in Europe, Scandinavia included, I have to say, maybe more so than what we are here, and in America. We're very, very dominantly and controlled by a very dominant left brain. If we can't think about it, if we can't believe in it, if we don't have evidence for it, we don't actually consider that it even exists. We have to validate everything through our understanding, through our left brain analysis and rationale. Yeah, I get this with clients all the time. They are the toughest clients. Because normally this aspect of us, when it takes over, doesn't allow them to feel anything. Everything has to be comprehended, everything has to be understood. And it's the same, not just at an individual level, but at a societal level, at a collective level here in the West. We actually move towards these items here. I'll just read these and then you'll understand. See if you can recognize any of these in yourself, perhaps. Rigid skepticism. What I call scientism. This is not real science, which is a combination of left and right brain. This is scientism, which is a form of a religious type of thinking, which has huge emphasis on the intellect, without intuition or feeling being present. Scientism. Atheism. Solipsism. I'll talk about that in a little while, hopefully. Moral relativity. Social Darwinism. Eugenics and authoritarianism. These are endemic within our culture. Endemic. Yeah? Can we see that? Can you understand this? This is the conditioning that we all have. Left brain, mostly. This leads to a worldview, which is a worldview of randomness. Universe is accidental. There's no creator. We're making it up, basically, as we go along. This is where that conclusion takes us towards. We have the flip side of that, of course. And there are a few people that actually, artists mostly, musicians, probably more here in Totnes by population demographics, perhaps in most towns and cities here in the UK, but they can be right brain, or predominantly right brain. So if we're right brain, we tend to go more towards seeing the gestalt, the whole picture. We're concerned with rhythm, colour, spatiality, sound. These sorts of things are in the right brain. Creativity, compassion, empathy, feeling for other human beings. Yeah? So many artist types, as I described, fall into this category. Actually, when I was younger, I was right brain. I was great at music, I was brilliant at art. And then I got propelled into my left brain, which is the world of the academic and science and all of that. And I lost all my creative ability in the space of, I would say, probably about 2 or 3 years. Whereas, where I was a very talented musician, I couldn't do anything when I was locked into my left brain prison. And that's pretty much where I remained even when I was a monk. And some would say even to this present day. So either one of us will fall into, all of us will fall into either one of these sides, one or the other predominantly. Right brain system, when we're too right brain, defers to the limbic system. So anybody that is predominantly right brain will start to operate off the mammillary or the limbic mind, which is to mean that they will mostly operate off their emotional center, neurology. Mostly. So you can see here this usually pertains to the feminine. This is usually women that tend to be more right brain than men, but not so much in the Western culture, I find. That's my experience. This can lead to naivety, blind belief, religious extremism, solipsism again. Let's get into that in a little while. Feelings of unworthiness, self-loathing, and becoming order-following or a willing slave. Yes, because you have no discernment. You always defer to somebody else's authority. The discernment comes in with the left brain. So you're always wanting to be told what to do. The worldview here is that God controls everything. Nothing is an accident. Everything is preordained. Everything is fixed. Yeah? Ultimately, life is meaningless. It leads to religious extremism and slave think. These are our left and right brains. What we're looking to do through yoga and through the ancient traditions of the East is to bring these two halves of us neurologically together. So there's an integration and a balance between the left and the right, between the masculine and the feminine side of us. That's the whole process, and that's the whole journey that we're on, remember? The masculine journey, coming down from the realms of light, and the feminine consciousness rising up through energy and matter. Inside of us, the meeting ground of this is the central nervous system and the balancing of these two hemispheres, the left and the right sides coming together to create the whole brain or the one brain. This in science is actually known as the corpus callosum. It's the bridge that connects the two hemispheres. And once that happens, our crown opens. This is called the Sahasrara. It creates an energy field that activates this center, but only when we're in perfect balance. And this can only be done through the central nervous system. Let's go back to the Indian culture, the Indian philosophy, because this was not as if it were this is new information for those guys. They understood the importance of the central nervous system and how we are conditioned to either be on the left or the right. And they devised techniques and processes to bring us to that center ground, which is what we're going to talk about and actually do a little practice and a run through today. Are you okay with that? Yeah? Any questions about that? Anybody got any queries about the central nervous system?
Can I just ask you, I used to have a really good attunement and then it's really got...
Not so good.
No. Right. Can someone else shut you down?
Yeah, we can in a way be shut down because we can actually be seduced by different forces inside of us and outside of us. So we can be taken perhaps into a state of disharmony or out of balance if we're actually able to access this at one time.
Yeah.
So we can start to lean, you might say, into the left brain analytical mind, or we can start to lean into the Gestalt feminine side.
Mm-hmm.
And then that will actually then shut this down.
Oh, okay.
It's very, very easy to get shut down.
Okay.
In Western culture, most of us go around in a shut down state. The onus or the emphasis of Western culture really is to shut us down and hold us and keep us in a shut down place. Have most of us figured this out? I mean, I'm sure we have. Yeah. You know, through media, through politics, through our education, through what people tell us to do, through the law, not the natural law, but humanly made laws. All of this is designed to hold us and restrain us and shut us down. And hold us either into the left or the right hemisphere of our central nervous system.
I did Reiki and it was never quite the same.
You had a...
Reiki.
Oh, you had some Reiki.
It's never quite the same.
Oh, I couldn't really comment on that. Yeah, I wouldn't know why that was.
Mm.
Yeah. But I have similarly experienced incredible openings. And yet, at the same time,
Yeah.
I've experienced incredible sort of darkness as well and shutdown. This is part of the process. Yes,
If
Ashley.
you're in the ashram and you're doing the whole left brain thing, how can you have an opening?
It's quite hard. Yeah, it's quite hard.
Does it happen with anyone?
It does, and it was happening with me in the ashram, but I had to kind of keep it a little bit secret when it was happening, because they consider that to be something that would be attributed to people that were approaching the enlightened state. So if you're already feeling that, and you know you're just like a 19 or a 20-year-old, they would consider what's called in Sanskrit sahaja, that you were mimicking or you were falsifying, and it was really frowned upon.
This was like a psychotic episode or something.
No, it wasn't. It was a real opening of the heart. It was a genuine opening of the heart, but it was never really encouraged in a way, strangely enough. Although it was always talked about, we were always going towards it. It was just never trusted that anybody would actually start to feel that, maybe. And if they were just pretending. It's a bit strange, yeah. It was much more that you had to follow authority, that you had to follow instruction, that you had to follow the letter of the law as laid out by the scripture. And eventually, if you did that, for many decades perhaps, maybe in your older years, you'll attain to this enlightened position. But you certainly could not have done that just as you were a very young neophyte devotee. That would have been considered to be a pretense, an artificial at that stage. But
so they wanted to keep it for themselves.
In a way, it's another control structure, yeah, which is what I realised, and that's why I had to escape from that. Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know if they're becoming more liberal now and more open. I have no idea, because I sort of literally just visit these days and don't hang around for too long. I just visit and then leave. So I'm not really in the system anymore. But yeah, it wouldn't consider to be so healthy actually. Better to stick and follow the rules and the regulations than to actually have any real awakening. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a left brain way of looking at it, you see. Because when you're awakening to the feminine because feelings. Yeah. And feelings are very threatening to the logical, rational mind. Because the mind can't understand what feelings are communicating. So, yeah. So it's dangerous to feel, in a way. Yeah. It can be quite repressive. Yeah. I was in a very old tradition, though. The one I was actually in was rooted in antiquity, you might say, and I think for that reason it was quite extreme. Yeah, it wasn't one of the modern movements at all. It was a really old one.
Did you worship a particular deity?
Well, they would worship Radha and Krishna mostly, and Lakshmi Narayan, and yeah. So these were predominantly what they would worship. I mean, it was always the couple. It was always the lover and the beloved.
So they didn't go in for the whole brain.
Not really. Although a lot of our lifestyle actually did, funnily enough, open us up in the right brain, because a lot of it was based around chanting and singing hymns and prayers, and this kind of thing. So that would be right brain. Yeah, yes. Yeah, I know. It was just the distrusting, I think, of feelings and the feminine that didn't really allow you to bring that forward. And it was sort of looked upon with suspicion if you did.
Were there any examples at the higher level?
Oh, totally. Including the Buddha and...
I mean, that you saw, that were...
Oh, well, not seen when I was in the ashram opening in that way. Probably more than I witnessed after I left the ashram. Yeah. It's strange. And also, funnily enough, my experience has also deepened and opened when I left the ashram. And I found a lot more of that blissful ecstasy was able to flow through my nervous system when I was actually out of a religious construct or spiritual model. Just living in society. Yeah. The understanding that yes, sorry.
Yeah, I've had this sort of crown awakening opening, but it didn't feel like it was coming, like you say, that it has to be the left and the right brain being in balance. It felt really ungrounded.
Ungrounded, yeah.
So
yeah,
it feels like it can be possible in different ways.
We can trigger that through different techniques and processes, absolutely. I mean, one of the most popular ones these days is through psychotropics and the use of things like ayahuasca and things like that.
Yeah.
They can open up these higher centres. Yeah, and it can feel like, we're in this enlightened place. And you are, in a way, you get a glimpse of that, I assume. Yeah, but unfortunately the effect of the drug wears off and you end up crashing down to earth like a lead balloon. And then you have to deal with that and pick up the pieces, which is sometimes not very easy at all. That can take sometimes months, if not years, to reconstruct after having these really wide open experiences. Some people handle them better than others. I just don't go there because I just know I wouldn't handle it very well at all. Yeah. So the point behind all of this really is to really emphasize what the ancients knew about our central nervous system, is that the central nervous system has a tendency towards, or a wanting to move towards, a state of enlightenment. It's as if, well, rather, it's not as if, we are enlightenment machines. We are designed, we are programmed, absolutely, for enlightenment. Yeah, if we could just let it unfold, and if we could just engage in active processes, which is going to require some use of the will and some energy and action, to actually awaken this within us. Our nervous system wants to do this 24/7, all the time. It is yearning for it. Every moment of our waking day is an opportunity for enlightenment, and our nervous system is propelling us towards that. Most of what we will experience are the symptoms of the non-enlightened state. The symptoms of hardship, pain, remorse, anger, all these emotions and challenges that we have in our life, which give rise also to physical symptoms, are a byproduct of this pressure for enlightenment within us. We are absolutely 100% orientated towards that. And this is called yoga. Literally means to yoke or to connect or to plug us back in. That's all it means. And it can take many, many different forms. In the West, it mostly means physical gymnastics. It mostly means doing what's called asanas, which is actually just a tiny, tiny aspect of the entirety of the yogic system as the ancients saw this. It's 1/8 actually, 1/8, which is like about 16 or 70% of the entire scheme. And yet in the West, we've hooked into this physical side called yoga, and we think it is only the postures, only the asanas. And it is so much more. And it's the so much more that I want to get across to you here tonight. And we're going to have a try with it as well, we'll see. This is called an integrated approach. An integrated approach. So the idea here is that you can practice one aspect of a system, like the yogic system, and develop it and develop it and develop it, but it is nowhere near as powerful as if you brought in several aspects simultaneously and worked on them all at the same time. Can you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Can you say it one more time? I'm quite lost on the last sentence.
It's like the sum of the parts is great. Some of the parts is greater than the whole. I think that's the way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for example, a lot of people, they think, oh, this is the way it is. I'm just going to do yoga. I'm just going to do mantras. I'm just going to do breathing exercises, right? I'm just going to do what this teacher tells me to do, this one thing, right? Like when we were in the temple, our focus was on mantras, which is sound meditation. Yeah. The idea here is that all of that is correct, but it's all best taken together. So you can become very, very proficient in any single one of those things, but it will not have the same effect as if you touched upon all of them lightly. Because collectively, there's more power in that. Can you see?
Because we're whole.
Yes,
Holistic.
exactly. It actually is working in a holistic way. And most of us in the West, and the East progressively becoming more and more so, tends to fragment everything down. They tend to break it all up into their constituent parts. And then they say, well, this is the bit that's most important. We're just going to do this now. Unfortunately for us in the West, it's the asanas, the postures and the seats. This has become the huge thing called the yoga industry, which is part, I believe, of the health and fitness industry, which is why it carries such a huge appeal. But you can only go so far with just doing yoga and asanas. And some people, many, many people, have reached the enlightened platform without doing any yoga or asanas. Ever. So how did those guys do it, you know? But this is the way, the truth and the light. Like some people have got to enlightenment and they've never even chanted a mantra in their entire life. They don't even know what a mantra is. So how could they become enlightened, you know, according to the school that I was in, if they don't practice mantra meditation? Yeah? So what we're going to do here now is we're going to move into these ancient practices and understanding of what the ancients saw. And when I say saw, I mean what they could see. See, in the West, it's as if we have obfuscated our inner knowing, our gnosis, with beliefs. And this is a trick, you might say, of the mind. It's a trick of Maya, that actually our inner knowing gets put aside and they're replaced with a belief system. But what the ancients had is this gnosis. They weren't talking about whether you believe in this or not, whether it's right or wrong or not. It wasn't up for debate or for question. It's like, this is what we see. This is the reality of what was going on inside me and you and everybody else, because they could see into those energetic realms. See, whereas we're cut off, they were not cut off. They were very much awake, alive and open and able to perceive energy and the effects these processes had on their energy field. And over, you could say, maybe thousands, if not tens of thousands of years, they honed and refined various practices and processes till they arrived at these systems, which worked very, very efficiently. And this is done through their own inner exploration. And in a way, I always like to say, and especially I like to say when I was talking in Norway, no matter what processes you're engaged in, you have to think this. This is what I believe. And this is just a belief, so you can take it or leave it. Which system on planet Earth has delivered the most profound and the most, in terms of quality and quantity, enlightened people ever? Which systems?
Buddhism.
Huh?
Buddhism.
Well, I believe, and this is just my belief, and that's why I say it's a belief, because I don't actually know what's happened going back, and I don't, through time, and I don't know every single system, but I believe it is the Indian Vedic system. I believe this has produced the greatest quantity and quality of enlightened beings on this planet, going back tens of thousands of years.
You mean like Yogananda and
Yogananda.
and Bhaji and
Yeah, everybody. They were all part of that, and they all took their wisdom from that system. They all grew up with that system, were educated in that, trained in that. That was their discipline. So what is it? Well, it's primarily what's called Ashtanga in India. Now Ashtanga has got confused with yoga and asanas again, because we have something called Ashtanga yoga here in the West, which means a particular style of asanas and postures. But Ashta literally means 8, Anga means limb. So Ashtanga means 8 limbs, or 8 parts. Yeah? And that's what it means. So the yogic tradition really has a focus on this 8-limb system. And this is the tradition really that was taught to young men and young women when they would come into the ashram. They would move progressively through these 8 separate processes. Now I'm going to touch upon all of these very quickly now, so you're familiar with what each of those are, and then we're going to actually take 2 or 3 of them and practice them today. Yeah, okay? But I want to give you an overview of the Ashtanga system. This is the ancient system as prescribed in the Vedas, okay? So we'll start at the top. Yeah?
I think there are 2 6s there, if I see it correctly. Is it?
Oh yes, so there are. Yeah, thank you. That's supposed to be 7, that's supposed to be 8.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that, that's my mistake. Typo.
Okay. I was just trying to find where the
Have I got
number
a
8
pen?
was.
Yeah, you're looking at 8, you only get to 7, yeah.
It's my left brain. Left brain, yeah.
There we go, we'll make a correction, very easily done.
Thank you.
The first thing is what's called yama. These are known as restraints. Yama. So basically, thou shalt not. These are things you should not do. So this is to do with non-violence, non-stealing, non-covetousness, not desiring something else or somebody else, and preservation and cultivation of sexual energy, so not losing or discharging your sexual energy wantonly. We've talked about this in spiritual incarnation. Preserving one's ching and life force energy. So these are the restraints. And there are a lot of rules and a lot of regulations when you enter into ashram life, believe me. Probably more to do with things that you can't do. We had 4 basic principles when I was in the temple. And you couldn't go into the ashram unless you had to abide by these 4 principles completely. So these were yamas. The first one was no meat eating, no meat, fish or eggs. The second one was no intoxication, which even included tea, coffee and chocolate. Yeah. The third one was no sex, what we called illicit sex, because you could actually have sex for procreation but nothing else. So everything else was considered illicit sex. So there's no sex, either physically or subtly, because the sex also happened mostly in the mind. So that was all ruled out. And the 4th principle was no gambling or idle sports.
What's idle sport?
Things like football, rugby, badminton, table tennis, Although you could wrestle.
My kind of sport.
Yeah, your sports, yeah. You could do wrestling and swimming for some reason. So you used to wrestle a lot. And it was okay, obviously, to go for a swim in the holy rivers, you know, things like this, yeah? Yeah. So those are yamas, those are restraints.
Why is no sport? I just can't understand.
Because it's to do with the glorification of the body, which is the false self.
And you can get aggressive with football and things.
Yeah, it becomes competitive. I'm better than you.
Yeah.
I'm superior to you. I know more than you. Can you see? Or I'm more powerful than you. So it cultivates that mentality. That's why I say in the West we stand no chance, because, you know, it's like in every subtle way we're bombarded in this way, you know, body beautiful. You know, we've all got to be youthful and vigorous and lively and productive people until we draw our very last breath, you know. It's like, and, you know, if we're anything other than that, you know, we have serious problems in terms of my value, my worth, and all of these issues that plague people, plague most of us. Yeah, particularly in the West. Of course, none of that's true, thankfully. It's all a bunch of hocus pocus and lies, you know. But nonetheless, we take it on because we're conditioned to take it on, and we live in this left brain prison for the most part. Makes sense in some ways. So, coming back to the next one, number 2, niyama. Niyama, that means observances, things that we should do. Okay. So once we go into an ashram and we're following all the rules and the regulations, then we can do this. Right? So these are things like purity, contentment, spiritual intensity, study of the scriptures, knowledge and active surrender to the divine. So these are all the things that are permitted, basically. Yeah, these are the things that are encouraged. Like here would be like a vegetarian diet, for example. Yeah. Moving on from there, we're most familiar with step 3, which is the asanas. So this is the physical seats and postures that we can do. It's a very, very important aspect of yoga, because we have to purify, we have to cleanse, and we have to fortify and strengthen the physical body. Why do we have to do that? We have to do that in order that the higher nature can come in, can be incarnate. Because if this vessel is not clean, if this vessel is not vibrating, you might say, at a higher frequency, our spiritual consciousness cannot incarnate. It won't come into a polluted, intoxicated, dirty, filthy body.
Why don't they incarnate and clean the body?
Well, the spirit, it is trying to do that. That's what I was saying. The pressure of that, wanting to, as it were, the force of that, wanting to come in, will constantly, as it were, push our toxicity to the surface. Yeah? But we call that disease or symptoms or illness. You see? That's the pressure of that, wanting it to come in, that's causing that. But it still can't come in until that job is done. Until that job is clean. This is the feminine aspect. The feminine aspect, remember, is the physical body and the etheric energy field. Our life force energy, in other words, our chi force.
Sorry, do you mind if I get some water?
No, not at all. We will stop for a break in a little while, and then you can get some. Yeah. Otherwise, help yourself. So this is our physical body. This is our life force energy. Yeah. So this needs to be fortified and purified. Yeah? Each and every one of us has a responsibility to do that. And asanas, yama, niyama and asanas are very much a part of this process. Following on from that, we have pranayama. Who has not heard of pranayama? We've all heard of pranayama. As part of it, we have yama again, which is restrain. Prana means life force energy. So it's to restrain or to hold back the life force energy, or to control it. And this is through breath work and through breath exercises. Very, very powerful. It works directly on our nervous system, as do the asanas. The pranayama also conditions the nervous system towards enlightenment. In fact, pranayama, if it's over-engaged with, as I have often experienced myself, you could become very overcooked. We're going to do some pranayama here today. I'm going to teach you a simple technique that you can take away and practice. But we have to be very, very careful with pranayama, because it can vitalize and energize the system very, very powerfully. My attitude has always been, go for it. You know, so when I find something and I think, yeah, this feels right, I just think, okay, I'm just going to do this and do this and do this. And then I end up usually just completely emotionally wrecked because I have so much then in way of emotional toxicity that is being forced out of my nervous system. The samskaras are just wanting to be purged. But too much, too quickly, all at once is not a good thing, as I discovered. And I discovered this more than once, I have to say. This it took a while for me to learn this lesson, that too much of a good thing actually is not so good. So pranayama we have to go very carefully with, particularly the technique we're going to teach you today. It's very, very powerful. It comes in the lineage, in the line from Paramahamsa Yogananda, and through that connection. But we will do that, and we'll cover that in a little while. From there we go to something called pratyahara, which is an inversion, you might say, of our sensory mechanism. See, most of us are engaged in the world because of our senses. Our senses, as it were, draw our consciousness out to the sense objects. So pratyahara basically does the opposite. It's like a turtle pulling in its limbs. And we start to turn our vision and our gaze inward towards our inner reality. And this is where what we call in my work, our inner life, starts to come awake. And we actually start to see, smell, touch, feel, basically experience what's going on inside of us, which is a realm and a dimension, or multiple realms and dimensions, which are far more, well, amazing and powerful, you might say, than anything we could conceive of in this physical 3D reality. It's wonderful. I mean, for those that have taken psychotropics, you've got a glimpse of that. But there is a way to get to that place very organically and naturally without having to take any drugs whatsoever. This is called pratyahara, the inversion of our senses. This brings us dharana, which is to focus. So this is where a lot of our practice really accumulates, in the capacity to make the mind single-pointed, to focus on the jivatma, to focus on what's called the paramatma, or the divine principle within us, to have an unwavering attention. Quite a lot of yogis or babas, they actually focus on a deity or a form. Actually, you can see when you go to India, there are lots and lots of temples, of course. Each temple has at its heart an altar. On every altar there's a form or a statue, quite often two, masculine and feminine. And it's usually these forms or these statues that it's recommended sometimes to focus on in terms of, you know, in your heart. Look this, see this, picture it like this. Because the mind needs something to actually have a form or a structure which you can get a handle on. You know, the divine, you might say, the spirit in all of us is beyond all of that. Yes, of course. But in terms of practical application, we need something that we can place our focus upon. Because if you ask someone to just say, focus on emptiness, focus on nothingness, the mind has a hard time with that. Just go empty. Yeah, it's like, well, how do I do that, you know? And even if you try and do that, you find it's really difficult because you start thinking after a little while. Because the mind wants to fill that space. Fill up the emptiness with thoughts and ideas and objects. So in this sense, we have an object here that we can focus on, a devotional point of focus. This brings the mind into like a laser-like pinpointedness. This is dharana. And then we have dhyana, which is the dissolving of that object in the mind and the handing of that over. So then we move beyond that. And this is dhyana, we'd call in the West meditation. And I'm going to show you and teach you again today a type of meditation that follows on from pranayama, which I call deep meditation. Deep meditation. It's a technique to go very deep, very quick. So the ancients know this as dhyana. And then finally, the eighth process is samadhi. Samadhi means complete absorption, where you become a chintya bheda abheda tattva, where you know your existence to be non-different from spirit, and yet you are distinct as a spiritual being. But you're completely at one. You might say samadhi. Yeah? Anybody not heard of this term, samadhi? Okay, yeah. So this is the eightfold process. And we're going to practice some pranayama and some dhyana today. It's part of this yogic process as taught by Paramahamsa Yogananda. we're going to look at a simplified form of that. Very, very powerful practices. These are the ones that I do daily, if not twice a day, if I can get round to it. How are we doing?
Good.
Okay. Let's take a little break, just for 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and look at something called the Trigunas and mantras. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to start with mantras. I'm going to start chanting some mantras for you, and I want you to see if you can feel the benefit of the vibration from these sounds. So we'll have 5 minutes, water for loo break, and then we'll start. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, 5-minute break. So, what have we learned? Not much. Some of that was a recap, some of that maybe new. I'm going to touch upon the Trigunas, just very briefly. Sounds painful, I know, but it's got to be done. And then we're going to move into doing some mantras, and I'm going to take you through the processes that I feel are some of the most powerful on the planet at this time. I'm not saying that for anybody here that you have to do what I do, or you have to accept what I say. By all means, use your own intelligence and your own discernment to decide what's right for you. Yeah? Let's start with the Trigunas. In the ancient wisdom, they saw that reality really is comprised of 3 natures, 3 natural elements that are constantly and absolutely everywhere in this natural universe. Everywhere. Every planet, every being, every particle is subject to these 3 natures. In English they call them ignorance, passion and goodness. In Sanskrit they call them tamas, rajas and sattva. These are basically here, we can see we have one more at the top here which is called Suddha Sattva that I've added in. This is called pure goodness or transcendence. If we just briefly touch upon these qualities, and then we'll go to mantras, okay? But I want to really emphasize this because it's a very, very important part of the enlightenment process, particularly in the East. The idea here is that we're all born ultimately at the bottom of this chart here. We're all born really into what they call tamas or ignorance. This is associated with the earth. Really, in a way, in the ashram, we would call this the feminine, right? Energy and matter. Yeah, the earth. This is dullness, inertia. Yeah, this is where we feel damaged, neglected, where we're inactive, where we're lazy, lethargic. This is tamas, what we used to call tamagun. We often used to joke with each other when we were in the ashram that, if we slept too long or we weren't doing enough work, that we were prone to the influence of tamas or ignorance, darkness. And we were just going into a very slothful and lazy state within us. And I get into this sometimes, I do, it hits me at times. And I just think, oh, bugger it. I'm just going to chill.
This is like the mineral and the human.
Yes, you'll be down in the basement with this. Absolutely. Lights off, darkness, ignorance, basically uninformed, inertia. Yeah. Intoxication actually takes us into this realm. And anything that's really dark and heavy in that sense, like for example, they would put here things like it's meat. Meat is something that is by nature tamas. All forms of meat are tamastic. So that's why in the East they have a vegetarian diet, because a vegetarian diet is considered to be of goodness, of sattva. Yeah, we'll get into this in a little while, but I want to move up. But basically, you get the idea that tamas really is the realm of darkness and inertia and inactivity. Yeah. From there we rise up, and this is where most of us are here, particularly in the West. We're in this realm of passion, what they call rajagun in the East, which is activity, desires, feelings to get ahead, yeah, the needing to acquire goods and services, and the world of money and commerce and politics, and the whole mechanism of human consciousness is driven by activity, action, 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 to satisfy and to get your needs met. Yeah, it's all about me, me, me. This is the me culture, rajas. Irrespective of how much damage I'm going to do to other people or the environment, I'm going to get what I want out of life. Yeah, that's the Rajastic mentality, the corporate mentality, you know, as I often refer to it. Yeah. However, this does give us our get up and go. I mean, it's much better than just being indolent and ignorant. You know, so in terms of energy, it's actually a progression. So whereas down here we might be depressed, here, you know, we're going to be angry. Yeah, but at least it's active and we're expressive and we're dynamic and we're able to do things. So that's helpful. Yeah. Moving up from that, then we have sattva. And sattva was really the ashram lifestyle. Ashrams in India are all geared towards this mode of being, this nature, and to the cultivation of sattvic consciousness, or consciousness which is based on goodness. Yeah? So this is purity, light, harmony that I've written here. So this is where we come into a consciousness of I'm going to aspire for the best that I can be. Yeah? I'm going to be the ultimate that I can possibly do or be for myself and for the world and for others. This is where morality comes in and ethics come in. And these higher principles that govern our life, like the scriptures in India and these teachings that we all want to take on board. This is to do with the cultivation of goodness within us. It makes us a caring, empathetic, compassionate, loving human being. And yet there is more. From sattva and goodness we can actually rise up to pseudo-sattva, or transcendental goodness, or pure goodness, which is ultimately where we want to go. And our nervous system really is orchestrated and designed to take us to pseudo-sattva. But we have to be very, very conscious. And the reason why I designed this is that for the most part, this is a continuous dance. And we'll find that at one time or another, one of these modes is predominant within our consciousness. You know, we can be a bit Rajastic at times. I mean, doing what I'm doing here is quite Rajastic. You know, it's quite passionate. You know, I've got to get out there and vocalise. You know, I'm not down here. You know, otherwise I would just be sitting, well, a little bit like you, I suppose. Dozing off in the back or whatever, you know. Which reminds me of my school days. I was probably mostly here, I think, just, oh boy. Yeah. And then sattva, of course. I mean, this is also diet-wise. This would be, you know, a vegetarian diet. You know, it's free from any kind of injury or harm on any living being, or looking to minimise one's injury and harm on any living being. But we're all aiming to get here, and the key really is to notice that we cannot get here except through here. Can you see? So we have to aim towards a sattvic lifestyle if we're going to actually transcend in this life. Most of us think that we can get here from actually being down here or here. In other words, oh, it doesn't matter, I can just do what I want, there's nothing, you know, nothing doing, I can just chill and I'll be enlightened. Or I'll just trust and it'll be okay, kind of attitude, down here. Or here, I'm going to work really hard at this and make enlightenment my business, you know. You know, but actually we need to be here before we can step to here. We have to be in a state of goodness. And there are various processes and there are various recommendations that will actually bring us to the platform of sattva very, very quickly. I mean, a lot of these are dietary, some of them are lifestyle choices. Some of these you might say are not going to fall on very receptive ears here in the West because they're not part of our normal conditioned Western existence. They're not. You know, we have a very tamastic, rajastic mix of things here in the West. We've hardly any goodness whatsoever. You know, there's hardly any care or consideration. I mean, culturally and socially. So this is where sattva comes in, and they need to really cultivate this element of purity within us, because only then can our nervous system and our energy life force be free enough to actually take the next step. So everything really in terms of what we do here, in terms of practices, is geared towards sattvic consciousness, whether you like it or not. And yet there are many things we can do in the context of our daily life that will really help. Diet being one of them. And that's the one thing that most people actually don't want to change. But that's the one thing that can make a huge impact, a really huge impact. I can't emphasise that enough.
Are you going to say some more about that?
Well, the diet?
Yes.
I wasn't going to, I was going to move on.
Okay, well,
Do you want me to?
It doesn't have to, well, only if it's convenient for you.
Okay, well, I'll just briefly touch upon this. Down here we have, the types of diets we have down here is basically meat-based. This will hold us in a tamastic state of consciousness. We're a long way from there. Yeah? So we need to really come off that toxic-ridden diet as quickly as possible. Yeah? This diet here is the diet we have in the West, the junk food diet, you might say. This is the fast get-up-and-go diet, the quick diet. These are things which are very fiery, salty, hot. They inflame or create a condition of excitement in the nervous system. Yeah, I think that lots of chilies and lots of spices and lots of tortillas and all this very nice food. Here, sattva is not as interesting. It's mostly what you might call high water content food. And the Indians also include dairy in that. They include milk and cheeses and yogurts and things like that. But you're looking at mostly vegetables, grains, pulses, beans, seeds, fruits.
Eggs.
Eggs would be tamas. Yeah.
Is that baby birds after all?
Huh? Yes, they're baby birds. Yeah. Yeah. So there is more we can get into this. In fact, it could be a whole separate talk on diet.
Yeah, no, I don't.
But I'm not going to get into it here. But needless to say, when we were in the ashram, we only had a sattvic diet. This diet is actually prescribed in the scriptures. It's actually in the Bhagavad Gita. Who's not heard of the Bhagavad Gita? Okay. The Bhagavad Gita is like the Hindu Bible.
Okay.
Yeah. So this diet is recommended in the Gita itself. And it cleanses and it purifies the nervous system and prepares it for enlightenment. But this can be a difficult thing for us Westerners if we're not in that way already. It can be hard to accept dietary change and dietary reform. But I would urge everyone to consider it in respect to these three modes of material nature. Because if we're really aiming towards enlightenment, we really need to consider these things very, very, very seriously. Because they can anchor us and weigh us and dull our consciousness. We're very dull-headed down here.
There's a density.
There's a density to it, yeah, there's a heaviness to it. And we're just very grounded, you might say, with meat, because meat's very grounding, but we're not able to elevate our consciousness very high at the same time. It's as if we've imprisoned and entombed ourselves in the cave. Yeah. So there are some prescriptions here. Some recommendations in a table here, which is also, actually I need to maybe let you have one of these. I've done the charts again in the book in full colour for anyone that's interested in these charts, and the table of recommendations is in the book as well. I can hand these out at the end. If anybody's interested, £2 or £3 for one of them just to cover our printing costs. Yeah, some additional information in there. So that's predominantly the three gunas. Tamas is responsible for destruction and for decay. Rajas is a creative force, yeah, and sattva is the force that maintains things. These are ruled by
What?
maintains.
Okay.
Yeah, maintenance. And these in the Hindu world are basically Shiva. This is Brahma, and this is Vishnu. For those that know a little bit about that. Okay. So these are the three modes of material nature, and how we can use them every single day of our life to recondition ourselves towards transcendental Visuddha-sattva consciousness. You okay with that? We can get more into that and other times if we want to explore that further.
There's still this total leaning towards the masculine is the best. That's the absolute. That's where everyone needs to go. The feminine is awful. And I feel like a deep pain in that, of feeling there's some untruth in that, because I don't only, experience the physical world is alive with that essence, everything.
Yeah, it is.
And you don't need to eat a certain way. You can feel that in any moment if you choose to. It can be so simple.
Yeah, you can.
be there in an
You can.
instant.
I mean,
So
you're
that's
absolutely
something
right.
that-
You can. What is here is not. I'm not saying that this is masculine here and this is feminine down here. By the way, I'm really talking about this in terms of deconditioning our nervous system, which
So
is
the
part of our
Shiva
physical body.
Was at the bottom there, wasn't it?
Huh?
Shiva or Shakti?
Shiva.
Shiva at the
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, this was not Shakti specifically at the bottom. This is an archetype in India called Shiva,
Yeah.
which is the force of destruction.
Yeah.
Yeah. But these really, I'm not saying here that we have to move up towards the masculine consciousness here and away from the feminine down here,
Right.
although you could perceive it in that way. But there are ways really of actually deconditioning our nervous system so that we can get to this place of union between the masculine and the feminine inside of us, each and every one of us, most expediently, most efficiently. And we can take a longer, slower route, we can take a windy route, that's our choice. But we have to know that we are doing that. It's not my job here today to describe ambulatory routes. What I want to do here is I want to present what I understand to be the quickest, shortest, most direct way, and then for everyone to discern in terms of what they choose, what they feel is right for them. I'm not saying to give up meat. If anybody does eat meat, I don't know. It's not my concern. I'm not saying it's bad or it's good. I'm not judging it in that way. But this is what the ancients understood, you know, with meat diets versus a vegetarian diet, that actually they favoured obviously the vegetarian because it cleansed the feminine. You know, it cleansed the nervous system in our physical body, and it brought it more alive, more vibrant. And it made it easier then to be here. Because with a cleansed nervous system, then we've only got one step to go, and we're feeling that connection to the all. So really, these are the modes of nature, and nature is feminine. You know, this is about consciousness as well. So, yeah, so it's about lifestyle, and it's about our attitude and beliefs as well. And there's no right or wrong about it. It's just a principle, and it's something really I feel, for me, I had to explain. Because in a way it's the fast track. And it's not everyone to want to do that, because we'll have preferences that may say, well, actually for me, you know, I want to go this way. And that's fine. It's not for me to say again whether that's right or wrong. But this is my understanding. This is the most direct route. We have to come to a platform of goodness, of compassion and care for ourselves and for others.
And it's not easy for a reason, I guess, isn't it?
It's not easy for a reason, yeah, and we're making it harder for ourselves in the West because we lack a certain education and understanding as to how we can make it easier for ourselves. And this is one of the things I think that's missing, is the understanding of these three modes of material nature. We call them the three modes, or the three gunas as they're known in Sanskrit.
I just see the danger. You see a lot of people that have tried to follow this path, and it becomes almost as tight as religions do, or like you described
Yes,
in
it
the
does.
ashram, it can
It
become
does.
like that, and then it creates a lot of guilt.
Yes.
Because there are feelings that are still there wanting to be
Yes.
lived, and then there's
Yes.
this suppression, and actually a real joylessness can come from that, of becoming so rigid rather than in the flow,
Yeah.
and then not making such a big deal out of things that, you know, eating the odd bit that might not be on that list,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
having
I know.
this or that feeling,
I know.
and then
The dietary
it's
thing's a
like-
nightmare.
sort of embracing a
Yeah.
bit of the diversity of life, of the creation, you know, the rainbow of it.
Yeah, well, we are here to experience
To
that.
balance
We are here
that.
we are. But all I'm pointing to here is how we can purify our nervous system most efficiently. That's all.
Yeah.
And that may take many, many diverse shapes, colours and forms, as I explained at the beginning. Because there are so many processes out there in terms of dietary recommendations, in terms of, you know, spiritual techniques even. And all these things are all well and good. But they all work on this one gateway of the central nervous system. They all work on that central nervous system. And to the degree that they impinge on that will determine the degree to how we feel connected. And how quickly they can bring us to that sense.
Yeah.
That's it. Now that's my understanding, and everything aims to do that. Everything aims to take us to that point. But really my filtering or my discernment has brought me to these conclusions in terms of what is the quickest, the most direct, the most rapid way of doing this in this single lifetime that I have. That's the one I want to know. And it's not for everyone, because some people will say that's really fundamentalist or that's really fanatical. But at the end of the day, we're all going to arrive at the same place in terms of we have to purify our nervous system. There's no doubt.
What happens for people who has spinal injury or these type of things, or mental brain damage, or you know?
Well, obviously that's a karma that's actually going to be played out during the course of a single life, and that they will learn and they will purify and cleanse their consciousness profoundly through that experience, and they will continue on. It's not that everybody is going to become enlightened in this life.
So
Can you
it's
say?
actually saying a healthy, perfect human body in terms of central nervous system. That is the way to enlightenment.
I'm saying yes, we need to purify our nervous system of samskaras, and of earthly physical toxins. Samskaras are in our consciousness, our emotional makeup. Remember from the previous talks? Samskaras operate directly on our nervous system. That's where we feel our emotions coming through into the physical realities, through our nervous system. So samskara, when it's awake and when it's active, will be felt through this mechanism of the central nervous system, absolutely. So we have to clean the samskaras, which are the masculine component, and toxins and chemicals and you know, which is the feminine component, from the as best we can, and we just do our best. I'm not saying we have to have a pristine, squeaky clean, 100%, you know, because I think we'll never get there in this world because there's far too much contamination, emotionally, psychologically, and physically. But we do our best. I mean, you know, that's all that I can do is just I do my best, and it's not perfect, and it will never be perfect. But it doesn't have to be, thankfully. But we're going to have to move on, otherwise we'll run out of time. But you understand, it's not for everyone to get to that place. And those guys, like my daughter, I have a handicapped daughter. I mean, what she's learning in this life, you know, it could be 10 lifetimes worth in one life. It's not for me to judge what she's going through. It could be, you know, so deeply profound and sacred. It could mean that she'll just have maybe one life or another life and she'll be enlightened. I don't know. And that could be still struggling on for another 200. You know, and my understanding of handicap is it is like that. It's actually a blessing for those souls that come in. I mean, more or less, souls are queuing up for handicapped bodies because of the challenge and the difficulty that it offers in terms of consciousness and purification. It's rapid and it's intense. So they are special beings usually that choose those particular...
Body, don't they?
Huh?
They learn a lot the body.
They learn a lot at the soul level. They're learning a lot. Yeah, that's intense purification. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. I just wanted to touch upon that lightly. So I'm afraid we might run out of time. So I want to introduce to mantras, and then we're going to do a practice, okay? Mantras, for me, were really the mainstay of my practice when I was a monk, and they still are a mainstay of my practice to this very day. I've put up a few mantras that I have here that I practice on a day-to-day basis, and I've actually written them in the phonetic form for anybody that might want to try them. They're also in this little booklet. Okay. Now, why mantra? Why is it so powerful? The reason why mantra is so powerful is in the word itself, mantra. Man is mind, tra is tool. It literally means a tool for the mind. And what mantra does really is it deconditions our nervous system, it deconditions our mind and brings us to stillness. Brings us to emptiness. Brings us to that enlightened state through sound. Now, sound, in the Vedic understanding, and I think also in the Christian and practically every esoteric understanding on the planet, is primal. In the beginning was the word, yeah, in the Bible. In the Vedas they call it Om, sound. So saying sound really is synonymous. It's one with our spirit nature. It's one with Brahman. It's non-different from who we are. So if we can make a sound that represents an archetype of consciousness within us, then we will embody that archetype. And that's where mantras are so very, very, very powerful. They're incredibly strong. Some of them are so strong and so powerful, you have to be careful how you use them. We're all familiar with, I think, one mantra, or one word, which is Om. Who doesn't know this one? Everybody knows Om. Yeah, yeah. This is the primal mantra. It said that everything really emanated from Om. And I've even read recently that in quantum physics, they actually say that the Om really is the sound of what they call the Big Bang. And that the universe is constantly Omming. And the ancients, the yogis and the babas going back, could actually hear with their inner ears the sound of the universe. They could hear this internal Om. I've heard it once. There's an energy that rushed through me. And it did sound like that. Like, wow. It was like a gong on the inside, you know. It was wonderful, but it was an incredible vibration. It felt like it would just take every atom and every particle of me apart. That's how strong it felt. But really the Om, you might say, is the primal sound. It's usually said at the beginning of every mantra to invoke goodness and auspiciousness. Yeah? So We have a collection of mantras here which I favour. They're called bija mantra. Bija means seed or seed sound. Now, what I discovered was on my journey was that every sound, every syllable in the Sanskrit language is a sound taken from one of the chakra petals inside of us. So we know we have 7 chakras. Every chakra is composed of a certain number of petals. I've actually depicted them here to some degree. Altogether, if you add up all the petals and all the chakras, they come to 50. And there are 50 letters in the Sanskrit language. So Sanskrit is known as a sacred language because of that. It's not a construct of the mind, it's actually derived from inner sound. Yeah? But each sound, each letter is known as a bija or a seed. And these bija mantras are the most powerful. So I have given you a collection of bija mantras here, which I'll go through in a moment. And I've also given you the bija mantras for each chakra. And I do this every morning. I go through each chakra in turn and activate it through the chakra sound. And this gets me in that still place where I can start to meditate more profoundly. The key to meditation is always to get the mind and the body into stillness. It's the hardest thing for all of us, is stillness. Yeah? So how can we get there most efficiently? And one of the most efficient tools is this tool of mantra. So we're going to do the chakra activation in a little while. But first I'm going to actually recite a mantra 3 times, and I want you to feel it. And see how this resonates with your body, see how this resonates with your mind. And then we're all going to do a mantra too as well. Okay, we're going to get you guys to do these things. We've got half an hour, so that's exactly as much time as I need to actually teach you this stuff. So let's start with mantra. So I'll do this 3 times. I just want you to relax on this one and just see how you feel. Okay? All right. This is an invocation that we chanted every day in the ashram, in the temples in India, before we actually recited scripture or class. So this is a mantra you might say for study and for learning. All right? And it goes like this. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Who does not feel the stillness? It's easy, it's so palatable, you can taste it, can't you?
It's lovely.
I mean, you could spend hours meditating to get to that feeling. In fact, it's just opened my crown chakra, it's just so amazing. I mean, you could spend hours and hours of just struggling with your mind to get to that point of stillness that we just reached there. And that took less than a minute.